friendships! Welcome back to another magical movie review. It's me, Magic by Molly. This week we are continuing our magical movie review of the MCU series in chronological order with Ant-Man. Now, of course, I would recommend that if you haven't watched any of the magical movie reviews yet, you should go back, watch those so you can catch up on where we are, because we're getting quite far into the MCU and I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to share their feelings along the way. And that brings me to my outfit choice of the day, which the theme is I had a really tough week with work and I still wanted to watch Ant-Man this weekend and still do magical movie review, but just wasn't really feeling the putting myself together part. So as you can tell, feelings are okay and we're just going with it. Right, buddy boy? He's my unofficial emotional support animal this weekend. He's doing a very good job of it. So if you haven't watched a magical movie review before, we break things down into 4 parts. We talk magical moments, which are just things that I enjoy about the movie. We also cover enchanting efforts, which are things that I don't super love or just leave big questions over my head. With all of that being said, we talk a lot about characters, so we also select a VMP, or a very magical person that wins the episode, and then we top it all off with my rankings of the movies in that series so far. And I wouldn't necessarily say favorite just because those kinds of things constantly change for me, but the kind of like my preferred watch list. Also not wearing my glasses again today because my glasses give me a headache for some reason, and also you can see all the lights and things and it's distracting even for me, so it's just better if you can see me but I can't see you. So we'll go ahead and just dive right in with magical moments. So of course I think that we're swinging from a complete opposite feel with the last movie being Age of Ultron, being a very complex project and collaborating on 4 different Avengers stories that are all kind of still piling on top of each other, all the way over to Ant-Man, which is a very, very simple story. And this is something that I started talking about when we first stopped the movie, and I at first thought it was a reason to be put under the Enchanting Efforts, but the more I thought about it, while it's easy to follow, it's not something that you really have to think too hard about. It's a feel-good, like, comedy action movie all wrapped into one. So I'd like to put it under magical moments for this particular review because, especially with the week that I've had, it was actually a nice change of pace to have a movie that I knew was going to be funny, I knew was going to be relatively easy to follow without being too worried about getting distracted, because that happens often with me and my attention being kept during a movie. If I were to have to choose a movie that I didn't really want to have to pay a lot of attention to or have on in the background for a relaxing movie watching experience, Ant-Man might be up there on my list. All of the origin movies, all of the first installments of each individual Avenger, if you really think about it, all of them are very simple. Adam made a really good observation that the first Iron Man is probably one of the most basic movies in the MCU as well. That's also another reason why I like Iron Man. It's really talking about where they're coming from and getting to know the character. So while the plot wasn't complicated, understanding Scott Lang and who he is and where he's coming from, and Hank Pym, the original Ant-Man, and just the integration of their stories was really interesting and a nice change of pace. So that's a magical moment for me. Of course, too, I also like that one of the, for lack of a better word, B-rated Avengers is getting his own movie, because Ant-Man isn't typically at the top of everybody's list, but he got quite a bit of attention for this movie and the next installment. Also, not just mentioning the other happenings in the other films or in the timeline, like Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D. and talking about the Starks and the technology, but we also actually get to see some characters pop in. So when we saw Peggy in the opening of the movie in 1989, I was hype. I was really excited to see her because I love her character. It brought me into the MCU feeling of Ant-Man. So like, when I first watched it, I had no idea who Ant-Man was like a few years ago. I'm just like, okay, it's just another Avenger that they're trying to throw into the mix, shake things up. But it actually made it feel like it had a place in the story. Same with Falcon, when Scott / Ant-Man is trying to break into the Avengers facility, kind of being brought into what all is going on and how like he's a relevant, still what I would consider a B-rated Avenger, still a good character, but not on the level of like the original Avengers list. Seeing those other characters, seeing those cameos of the other Avengers, like a more natural fit. Of course, because you can talk about Hydra all day long, but when you're not actually seeing something, seeing is believing. So I'm more bought into the fact that this fits into the MCU timeline overall. Of course, I can't continue on with a magical movie review at any point in any of these movies without talking about the actual creatures. I just enjoy the animals or just animated non-human creatures throughout all of the films, but in this one in particular, the ants are incredibly just precious, I would say. They're a whole character on its own, not just a prop or a tool for Ant-Man to be successful. Like, we actually start caring about these ants and cheering them on, when in reality, we all probably feel that ants can be a nuisance or bothersome, especially if you're like me and my mom and we're allergic to fire ant bites. Probably not going to be your favorite animal or insect, but it brings more value and understanding to this particular creature that we all just kind of brush to the side. We spray our houses and apartments for, so that they don't come in when you're cheering them on and wanting them to be successful. And also, it just makes me so incredibly happy that all of the main characters, Hank, Hope, and Scott, like, all actually really care about the ants. Like, it's not about just using them to their advantage. It's about respect and understanding. And one of my favorite scenes is when they're like getting ready for battle. Hank takes like a little tiny suit of armor-ish thing and shrinks it, and Scott is actually putting on what looks like little bulletproof vests on all the ants. Like, I think the fact that they had just days to figure out how they were going to infiltrate this highly secure facility, they took the time to make sure that they were protecting their friends as much as possible. I love Paul Rudd, and I think he was a good cast for this movie. There's some points where I'm not sure if he's quite believable as like the no good criminal, but also a electrical engineer slash thief slash dad. Like, he's just got a lot of personality built into him. And at first I wasn't quite sure if Paul Rudd was the right person for that, because I think we all at this point have kind of a perception of who he's supposed to be or what kind of characters he plays. But the more I watched the movie, I think they couldn't have done anybody or hired anybody better to play that role. Like, I think he interjected like really good comedy throughout the movie, and just his sensitivity to the ants. Like, I don't know, I just thought Paul Rudd was a really great cast for Scott Lang. Which kind of brings me into a little bit of the Enchanting Efforts section. So the first one that I wrote down was when Scott Lang comes out of prison and he's trying to get his life together with his daughter. It seems like we're all like, of course we're all sympathetic to the white guy that can't get a job when thousands and upon millions of prisoners that have come out of the system that are of color can't find a job, and yet we tell them all that they've just got to figure it out. So we're a little bit more understanding of the guy that kind of goes back to burgling as his last resort, but all of these other criminals in real life, that we can't give that kind of second chance, or it just seems a little bit hypocritical, which is more of just a social commentary on my part. But of course that was just something that I thought of, and I don't know, I think it would have been nice of them to like make a comment on that. The next two are more like just question marks over my head. So first big question, Darren Cross, of course, the guy with issues that ends up becoming the Yellow Jacket. In the beginning of the movie, he kind of like shows the investors the project that he's working on, and then there's a guy that like questions him. I think his name is Frank, and then he like stalks him in the bathroom, which first of all, creepy. So he like zaps the guy, right? Kind of as a trial to see what would happen with live tissue. And of course he's unsuccessful, and the guy turns into like a goo throb on the floor. Well, Darren just takes like a paper towel and wipes it, but he barely even wipes it. Like, what if somebody comes in and sees like it's clearly blood, goo, sort of. Like, somebody's gonna notice and or like slip on it when they're walking through the bathroom. Like, he barely even tries to get rid of the evidence. Is it because he's cocky and he doesn't think that anybody's really gonna notice the goo on the floor that used to be a human being? Or is it just that like maybe he so much gooifies it that it's like untraceable as a person anyway? Like, that's just a big question that I have rattling around up there, because like that's just lazy. Also, clearly you never cleaned up after yourself in your entire life, because that was just embarrassing. The other big question that I have, of course, is when Scott and the gang break into Pim's house and he like takes the safe door off, or sort of blows it off with liquid nitrogen, whatever, however. He clearly recognizes when he goes in there, it's like, it's just an old motorcycle suit. So why take it? Like, if there's nothing in there of value that you see, why even bother taking something, like physically taking evidence with you to prove that you were there? Like, obviously I know that we're doing it for the sake of the story, so that Hank can like tap into him and like test him out with the suit, and then basically like have that comedic moment where he gets caught by the cops when he's trying to return it. Like, I get why it happens for the sake of the movie, but logically, let's say I were to break into somebody's house and I didn't see anything I wanted, I'm not just gonna take a sweater just for the sake of taking a sweater. So there's just like a couple of little like silly, like, why would you do that kind of thing in the movie, because logically nobody would do that. But of course, like, we're in an origin story and it's really just about getting us into, like, just getting us right into what's supposed to be happening. So I get it, but I don't get it, and I'm not sure that I like it. For me, of course, is using the lambs as the live tissue. Of course, clearly in the movie, Hope verbally just is saying, hey, I thought we were going to use mice, and she's obviously upset, and Darren doesn't really care about what it is that he's testing on. Anytime I've watched this with other people or talk about it with other people, obviously they're upset that they're using live tissue to test this serum or this zapping ability to make the sheep smaller. And they get really upset when they turn to goo, or like when he finally does shrink a sheep and he like flicks the little thing and the sheep goes like falling around. Like, it's upsetting, and it's like, you realize that this is happening all the time, right? Like, this is actually real life. Like, this part isn't science fiction. I feel like people should be a little bit more upset about this in general. Also, again, me just having social commentary on what people are actually upset about versus like applying it to their real lives. Like, take a look at where your meat comes from, and I promise you, you'll probably feel the same way about that as you did these poor little sheep. So that's just me. I'm glad that people are putting it out there into the movies to actually show like this is what we legitimately do to test things all the time. I want people to actually care about it a little bit more. So probably more of a magical moment in itself, but the enchanting effort is that the effect that it has isn't landing in the way that I want it to. And then really the only problem, not the only problem, but the biggest problem that I have regarding just the plot in general, while I'm glad that it's a simpler plot to follow, of course it was predictable because we've seen this story before where the prodigy is upset that they're not getting the attention that they see that they deserve, and try to invent something on their own or hire people to make their evil plan come true, and then they're overcome by the hero of the story. I thought back to Iron Man, where Jeff Bridges is basically the same character, just a little bit older and more focused on money. Not that Darren Cross isn't obsessed with money, but it's more of just about the power, I think, and the recognition for, I can't even remember his character's name, but we literally have had this story before. I just think Iron Man did it a little bit better. I'm docking that in the Enchanting Effort list because, like, we've done this story before, it's a little bit predictable, and literally the villain makes his own suit and attacks the original suit, like in both stories. So I still like the movie. I thought visually it's beautiful. Great movie. I would definitely watch it again multiple times, especially when I'm having like I need to just have some kind of MCU in my life but not overcomplicate my life at the same time. So with that being said, I'm ready to announce my VMP as Scott Lang / Ant-Man. I just thought Paul Rudd did such a great job with this particular character and making him just believable. I thought that he had, from the beginning, just really good character. Who he is as a person was constant throughout the movie. I don't think he in particular had a really great, and by great I mean like large or dramatic character arc, but I thought he just provided really good comedy in the movie. I thought that he was a good character to take on the role as Ant-Man. I appreciated his appreciation for the ants and learning to like adapt to nature instead of making nature adapt to him, and I just thought it was such a great addition to the Avengers team. But of course there's a lot of really great characters in the movie, so if you disagree or have somebody else that you think would be up there as far as who should win the episode, make sure you comment below. Okay, so that brings me to the rankings of the movies so far in the MCU series, and honestly, I actually put this one in a couple different places and then deleted and put it in another place and back and forth a couple times because I kept going back and forth between my favorites versus which ones would I rather watch on a rainy day or on any just generic day. Ultimately, I'm keeping the Avengers at the top, then Iron Man, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Captain America the First Avenger, Guardians of the Galaxy, Thor, Iron Man 3, Avengers Age of Ultron, Captain Marvel, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Ant-Man, Iron Man 2, Incredible Hulk, and Thor Dark World. It pained me to put it at the bottom of the list. I don't know if I necessarily think it deserves to be down that far, but I think out of the movies in this list, I would rather watch Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Like if I had my option of those two, Iron Man 2, I definitely would rather watch Ant-Man. So I kind of just pair them up going down the list, and I had a couple of pairings where it was hard to beat. Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is good. I also appreciated Ant-Man this time a little bit more than I think I did in the past, so I definitely had a battle with that one. So it's an ever-changing list. If I ever go through the entire MCU again in my lifetime, which I know I will, then the list will probably change again at that point. I think it all depends on where I am in life. And this week, my life is in nap mode. I so appreciate you all coming back again this week to hang out with me and talk about our favorite movies. Make sure that you like and subscribe. Make sure that you share this with your friends if you think that they have any comments or ideas to share about these movies that we're talking about, because I do want this to be an open and honest community. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you follow me on all the social medias at MagicXMolly. I'm pretty much on all of them, and if I'm not, it's because I don't care about all of the other ones. So I appreciate you. Thank you all, and of course, stay weird.